Now, as we jump into chapter 19, it starts out in verse 1, and there came 2 angels to Sodom at even. Joseph Smith changed the number 2 to match the number 3 from the chapter before with the Abraham story. And Lot sat in the gate of Sodom.
And let's just pause there for just a minute. Now, most of the cities that we live in today do not have walls around them. And in the ancient world, many cities were walled. It was a form of protection. And the city gate was where much of the political judgment and economic activity would happen. Imagine it's like the town square. Mm-hmm. So when you hear city gate at any point in the Bible, imagine this is the town square. This is where all the merchants are. This is where anybody who's coming out in and out, you can check to make sure they actually belong there. And if you are sitting in a city gate, you often are somebody in a position of power, wealth, authority, and prestige. So Lot apparently at this point had become...
He's risen to power, whether it's political or economic or both. He's sitting in power.
And if you go to Israel today, up in the north, there's the ancient city of Dan, and you actually can see one of these city gates. And we'll put an image here for you to look at. And these are very common. And so it's interesting here, like Abraham, Lot is immediately welcoming to strangers, which was not always the case in these cities because you never know who these people are. Are they going to come in and set fire to the city or steal our things? And Lot is, with alacrity, trying to serve them. But again, there's just a significant thing that the most significant events in the cities often happened at city gates.
Good. So Lot invites them into his house, into his home, feeds them. You get the experience with the men of the city demanding that they be sent out.
So this is a tough chapter. If you remember, in the Middle East, anciently and still to the day, your hospitality to somebody was really crucial. Now let's actually tie this into Jesus. He's trying to invite us into his home, right? He wants us to come into his home so he can take care of our needs. So this is a big deal about the hospitality you provide. Now, what greater form of inhospitality could a city do than to have strangers come in and you abuse them? Like, God would never do that. He would welcome us and wash our feet and comfort us, not abuse us. And so even today, God expects us to treat the foreigners and strangers well, because he tells the people, you Israelites were slaves in a foreign country. You should never treat people poorly. And so then you get this passage, it seems like Lot is saying, well, I'm going to protect these guests by giving away my daughters to the mob. Some biblical scholars have looked at this and said it actually may be that the way it's expressed that Lot actually is saying to the crowd, do you really think that's how to treat people? Like as if I'd give my daughters up to you guys? And like you might say something like that today in irony to get the point across of how egregious somebody is being in their thoughts or actions. And so if that's the case, Lot actually isn't offering his daughters up, but he's actually trying to jar this mob into thinking like, oh my gosh, yeah, we should not be treating people like this. Like, you wouldn't treat my daughters like this. I mean, really, you expect me to hand them out to you? Is that how it's supposed to happen? Now, again, we don't really know. And I sometimes think to myself, boy, it would have been great if the plain and precious things had been left in the scriptures and this been left out. My life probably may have been better that way.
To fly through the rest of this story, they're smitten with blindness in verse 11. And then these visitors, the 3 men, say to Lot, gather any of your family and leave early because we're going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And in verse 15, when the morning arose, then the angels hastened.
By the way, this is crazy because look at verse 16. And while Lot lingered. Now, we're going to get to Abraham's story in Genesis 22, where God asks him to sacrifice his son. And it says, early in the morning, Abraham rises up to go do the deed. And here, they're like, could you get out of town? And he's like, well,
take hold upon the hand.
And he's like, I got to do the dishes. Maybe I got to latch up my shoes a bit more. I mean, maybe I got to close the curtains. It's like, dude, get out of town now. And they literally grab him by the hand, which is not always typical of angels intervening that physically in somebody's salvation.
So you have to wait until you get to the very bottom of that column in our English Bible, down to verse 22. Haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou come thither. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar, where he has to leave Sodom and go to Zoar before the angels can do what they need to do. So the sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. And then verse 24, the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and that which grew upon the ground.